I had farmland.
Well, I guess it was $3.99, but I had $1 coupon thing.
Well, I don't know there's such a thing as bad bacon, so.
Well, you know,
Some are just better than others.
breakfast of bacon and eggs. Days to midnight.
That's right. And I think that's a misnomer, clogging arteries. I don't know that necessarily happens. Is that really proven? Did you read that on the internet?
No, I think we've lived it.
How much bacon did you eat, brother? Wow.
See, that's propaganda from the beef people.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. Good call,
And
Terry.
the pork people have the propaganda about don't eat the red meat.
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
out of the
So y'all
ground.
been looking at the
Yeah.
put-on sites again.
Yeah.
And then the chickens say, eat more beef.
Yeah.
All right. So as we're starting today, let's see. I think. Okay. I thought I heard some rumbling back there.
This
So.
is Mike.
Oh, okay. Oh. All right. Thank you. I thought maybe something was happening inside, maybe a rapture. Who knows? Probably not, though, right, Bruce?
Now, the rumbling and thunder might be a warning.
That's true. So when we were in Lectures of Faith 7, we're looking at 7:7, by the way. We're in Lectures of Faith 7:7. Actually, we're ending up in 6. And we're talking about this whole thing of faith. And of course, it's interesting that the lecture is about faith, and because faith is such a key importance really to our lives. And I think we experience faith every day. We just sometimes don't see it as faith, and I think we see it as other things that take place. We've used the word luck so many times, or providence, or serendipity, or we put a lot of names to really what our faith is and what it should be. And when we read that, even the angels, or those angelic beings, or even anything commissioned by God has faith. And so we see that as such a depth of our existence. And I've been thinking about this last week. I think we've taken that word faith and we've made it very vanilla. Because everything, has faith, right? There's songs about having faith. There's so many things. Mark, I assume you fixed the sound? Because I looked and I couldn't find it. So we've been transmitting to the world without sound. So everything you've said the last 2 weeks, you're great. You're good. Yeah, I never thought to check my phone, so don't be so obvious about it, Mark. So when we look at where we're at, let's back up a little bit. Let's get into 2nd Nephi. We're just going to take a couple of seconds here. And 1 and 51, 2nd Nephi 1, verse 50 actually will start. And last week when we talked about it, it was, and it must needs be that the power of God must be with him, even unto his commanding you that you must obey. But behold, it was not him, but it was the Spirit of the Lord which was in him. Now, if you've done any study on faith, which I'm assuming you have at some point, what happens when you have faith? What takes place within the body, in the person, in the mind, or in the heart when you truly have faith? Bruce?
Well, from my understanding, there's a I'm not even sure. There's a joy. There's a confidence, and there's a humility there as well. You recognize that the faith that you have is generated or nurtured by something greater than yourself, and when you really develop it, you realize that nothing's impossible for you if it's with God's will.
That's a good point, and I think you hit it when you talked about humility, because when you have humility, so faith is really releasing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Faith is releasing what you're holding on to something that you don't know. So that's the thing that we have to remember. Many times we say we have faith because we know what it is. Like this morning, I had faith that the lights would turn on. I had faith that the computers would turn on. So is that really faith? Or was that faith with a handle? Now, we were talking about, and you were talking in Luke this morning, right, in your pre-worship, Terry, and do you think Luke had some faith?
I don't think there's anybody that wrote anything in this.
I don't think there's anybody who wrote anything in the scriptures didn't have faith.
Okay, that's a great way to put it. Because think about what was happening. They were promoting, proclaiming, and professing a message that was contrary to the norm, right? They were not promoting obedience to the priesthood, obedience to the king, or the ruler of the day, the physical ruler. What were they promoting?
Themselves.
They were, yeah. Well, yeah, to that point, yeah.
They were, how I describe them, hypocrites.
Yep.
Very much so, because what they did out in public was not what they did behind closed doors.
That's true. And frankly, that's kind of a type and a shadow, isn't it? I mean, that happens a lot when we look at it. Bruce?
Yeah, I just remembered something I jotted down, I don't know how many years ago. But it says, faith is when you come to the end of all light you know and must step off into darkness. One of two things will happen. Either there will be solid ground to stand on, or you'll be taught how to fly.
Yeah, that's a great saying. I don't know where you got that, but that is a great saying. And that is good because that is true. You know, faith, and we'll get to that point. There have been points in your life, I'm sure, that you've had to rely more on faith than on knowledge. Depending upon what circumstances you've been confronted with, whether they be physical or emotional or spiritual. I think we've all had to kind of step out in faith. Now, there are those that don't have any faith, and they don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. And can you imagine, without faith, what happens then? What do you have?
Chaos.
You have chaos. You could have despair. You could have just a lack of concern of anything, so I don't care anymore, because they don't have anything to hold on to. And that's one of the things that we have. So if we look, let's get into 1 Thessalonians. And this is in 1 Thessalonians, excuse me, it talks about Christ coming in chapter 5. And when we think about what we're being told here in 1 Thessalonians 5, and then we'll start with verse 4, this is Paul, talking to the church, and he's talking about, them coming and going and etc. And he's talking about the second coming, which already, now think about this, there was already talk about the second coming of Christ then, and think about how many years ago that was. Do we talk about the second coming of Christ now? Kind of, sometimes, depending, right? What is the, let's break this down a little bit. What's the significance of Christ coming the second time? I think we're in the Gospel 101 right now. So what is the significance of Christ coming the second time? Angie?
He's taking us home.
Okay. Yeah.
We get to be with him and the Father.
He's reclaiming us. He has claimed us through his death and resurrection. He's reclaiming us at his second coming. And what's the whole idea behind the second coming? Because what are we in now? What do we call it here within the restoration?
Probationary.
Yeah, probationary. So we're working out our salvation, and that's what it talks about. Well, when we get here in 1 Thessalonians 5 and start with 4, it says, "But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief." So he's talking to the Thessalonians and saying, you're not in darkness. Now, when I read this, when I found this, because I was searching, I thought, that's us. Because are we in darkness? Or is it an overcast day?
That's it.
Okay, it's an overcast day.
Walking through that thick fog that some got lost in when they let go of the rod of iron.
Okay, very good. And what Paul is saying is that, that you should, that it should not overtake us as a thief in the night. And why not?
Plus we've been given.
Nope, thank you, Bruce.
Because we've been given everything we need to know.
Okay.
In here, if we avail ourselves to it.
Okay, that's a good
There
point.
is an active portion on our part.
So when you say avail yourself to it, didn't you really say if you have faith in that which is written,
Exactly.
that which is then proclaimed? You realize that for those, as I look in the room, many of you, many of us, all of us, most of us have kind of walked in the faith for a lot of years. And the question is, did we walk in the faith or did we walk in the message? What did we walk in? Brian, you have a comment?
So, for those who maybe not think they walk in darkness, the Book of Mormon talks clearly about the mist of darkness
Right.
for everyone. And the only thing that leads people to the tree is the rod of iron, which is the word, which is exactly what you're talking about. If you abide within that and hold on to that and use that as your guide, you won't be lost in the darkness.
Right.
You won't wander off and be led astray by all these other doctrines of men and everything else that comes with it.
That's a good point, because when we look in verse 5 here, what does it tell us that we are, or that we should be? Terry?
That we're all children of the light and we're all children of the day.
Exactly. Now, what does it mean to be of the light? Do you see what Paul's doing here? Terry?
I would say it would be an awareness of the word.
Okay, the Word of God, right? Okay. Bruce, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I was going to say it's being connected to that spirit that's been given to us to have the wisdom, the faith, and the understanding of this.
Okay, that's true. Now realize, why is Paul coming back to this church? Do you know? Well, there's a common theme why he wrote letters to all of them. But why was he writing letters? Why was he writing letters to the churches?
To encourage.
Courage and Brian, what'd you say? Warnings, because they had slid from the original teachings, and what he's reminding them is, now, do we have light today? Well, you guys are slow today. The light is right in front of you. Everybody has the light in front of them. Steve, even you do. See? He's looking very scholarly today, by the way. But, when we look at that, we have the light. The question becomes, have we turned the switch? Have we flipped it on? Because the light is with us. Now, we could just read it. And if you just read it, does it become light? No. What does it take for it to become light within your life? Angie?
To study it and to believe it, to take it into your heart and to live it.
Okay. To live it, because that means you have faith in what is written is true, is pure, and is relevant to what things are. And when Paul goes on a little bit further, he says in verse 6, therefore let us not sleep as do others. And who's he referencing if he's talking about sleeping as do others? Bruce? Or Terry? I don't care.
And say the pagans?
Okay, the non-believers. You can use non-believers or those, I realize that there are believers and non-believers. I don't even think we understand what that means. Because I think some of us today are non-believers. Terry?
I think there's different levels of believing.
Okay.
Some people may be up here, some people may be down here,
Okay.
and everywhere in between. And I also think that fluctuates with the person. This is one day you could be here, and the next day you could be there, or you could some be in between.
Right.
So I guess it depends on whether you're having a good day or a bad day.
Very good. And that's it in the summary, right? Bruce, did you have thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to say, part of what was going on in Thessalonica at this time was that everybody thought the return of Christ was imminent. Like, it's going to happen
Quickly.
very quickly. And now we're getting into an extended period of time, decades, and two things were going on here. First of all, there was a lot of misinformation infiltrating the group.
Oh, gee.
And that was and that was happening with some of the other churches, as Revelation talks about.
Right.
And this doubt crept in. And so a lot of folks started falling back into the ways of the world.
Yeah.
A lot of them went into speculating what was going to happen next year, what we were going to see when Christ was coming, trying to determine if it's going to be 86 or 2023 or whatever the case might be, year 2000. They were going through that same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the same things that we're struggling with today in the church, is, oh my gosh, there's going to be this new revelation coming out or whatever. I won't go into more than that. Okay, Brian, that's for another time. But this is what they were facing. Yeah. And Paul, he's trying to reopen their eyes. He's trying to light the lantern in their midst again.
Yeah.
And there's a few that were holding on, but we're probably feeling overwhelmed. Gee, do we feel that way sometimes?
All right. Yeah, and that's a good point. When we set ourselves up, because, and you hit on something that's right and true, though we see that today. A lot of this we see even today, right, Bruce? We see many of these same things today. We have hope and expectations. We've talked in the past when the RLJS church was whole. When you went to conference, what was the main thing you looked for? You anticipated when you went to World Conference?
Inspired document for most.
Exactly, right?
Enlightenment.
Yeah, the enlightenment, the inspired document. You were looking for that. And did you ever feel disappointed or let down when the document didn't read what you thought it should read? It didn't say what you thought it should say? See, and probably yes at some point. Some are going, oh yeah. Some are, oh my gosh. So you see those things as they transpire. We put our hope, we put our faith into short time stuff. Whereas we are we looking for Zion, by the way?
I would hope so.
Okay.
Hope so.
Now, that's a good point. Brian, you going to turn that down a little bit for us? So, yeah, I get a feedback. For those that have great hearing, you're going, ah. For those that don't, it's going, ugh. So, there you go. Does that sound a little bit better?
Yeah.
All right. Can you still hear? I don't know if we're coming. All right.
It kind of fades in and out.
Yeah, turn it down. I think it's the microphones that are getting the feedback. So, okay.
Might be the gain rather than the volume.
Yeah. So when we look at that and we put our hopes in all those short-term events, like we talked about Zion, we've been trying to get to Zion for how long?
1830?
Yeah, since about 1830. So, but you see what we've done. We've done exactly what has happened here. We've turned all of these into dates. Well, in 2 years, 5 years, even when Zion, was promised, but there were conditions in the 1830s about Zion being real, right? What were those conditions?
The same ones that still stand for us. Instead of looking for something that's out there,
Right.
we need to be looking at what's in here, like you read from section 45 this morning.
Yeah.
You can't say it better than that.
That's right. That's true. Because, you see, we have faith in those things that we think we can hold on to. We have faith in a date. We have faith in a moment. We have faith in those things. Other than what does Paul tell the church here in verse 8, chapter 5, verse 8? Who would read that for us?
I'll read it.
Terry?
Number 8. But let us, who are of the day, be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet, the hope of salvation.
See how, okay, I know what Paul was saying here, but what is Paul telling you with this? What counsel is Paul telling you?
Right?
Yeah.
One of the things that he's telling me is, first of all, too many of us get hooked up on that word sober and translate it to somber, I think.
Good point.
But anyways, what he's saying here to me is don't chase after wild speculation. You've got the true message. You've got the gospel of Christ as he taught it. You've got all these things. So continue with faith and hope. Act on that faith and hope. And all of a sudden, bang, the gate of Zion's going to be in front of you.
That's true. Terry, you got a comment?
I lost it. Sorry.
Okay. Well, it'll come back. We're here every week, same time, same channel. So,
Here, I got a paper clip so you can pin the next
but here's what Paul is saying. Now think about it. Let's read this again, because this goes with our faith. It says, "But let us, who are of the day, be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet, the hope of salvation." Who is he talking about having to do the work?
The people.
Okay, ourselves.
Yeah.
What he is saying is and he says this many times. I, Paul, cannot save you. Who can save you? Jesus Christ. By doing what? By believing. And by believing, you do what Paul says here. And you see, he's using these physical descriptors. So when he talks about, and by the way, we know where this breastplate and everything are talked about. I'm sorry? Oh, I apologize. 1 Thessalonians 5, and right now we're very into verse 8. So we see then, remember, now you talk about the breastplate of, now in Ephesians, what is it called? What's the breastplate called? Well, there's your homework. You got to look up in Ephesians to figure out, okay, what the breastplate is called. But here it's called faith and love, which is really the same thing as what it's called in Ephesians. Now think about faith and love.
Righteousness.
Righteousness. There you go. Thank you, Mark. The breastplate of righteousness. Isn't righteousness faith and love? Faith and love become righteous. Did Christ have faith? Did he have love? What was he? Righteous. You see what's happening here is this becomes an understanding of who we need to do, what we need to do. So it says, then putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet, and of course the helmet in Ephesians is part of, why would you put a helmet on? What are you protecting? Your head. Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah, you're protecting your head, where, the seat of your knowledge, your understanding.
Very good.
And the interesting thing about faith and love, faith uplifts us internally. Love not only uplifts us, but uplifts others.
So it's an internal, external.
Right,
action,
and you really can't have one without the other.
Right, exactly. And so when we look at the life of Christ, Christ had faith in the Father and in his purpose. Therefore, he had the faith, he had the love, and his love drove him, compelled him, motivated him to fulfill the very simple thing that God asked him to do. And we see that happen here because after we get that done, it even talks about in verse 9, and after that second sentence, but to obtain salvation by our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us in verse 10, whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. This is the salvation message right here, isn't it? And all you have to do is have faith, and that will get us so much farther, because verse 11 really strengthens what Bruce Chapin was saying. And what does verse 11 tell us? Bruce?
Basically, to find comfort in the faith you have and use your love and faith to uplift others, to show them the way, to give them a clear message, which in my mind going through this begs the question, What are we, what am I still lacking? What am I not exercising in that equation to bring, Zion back into the world?
That's right. That's a great reflection because it goes back up in those verses. Let us not sleep, because if you're sleeping, you're not reflecting, and if you're awake, you're reflecting, you're thinking, or you should be. And when we talk about then all of the armor that you're to have, and what that is, what we can see it carnally, we understand it spiritually, and then it takes us down to the salvation of Christ, but then it goes back to that love to edify each other. And we've talked about that many times. Edification means correcting and uplifting. Now there's once again, I'm beginning to understand so clearly that many of the words that we have and use today, when we get beyond this plane, we will understand the depth of words like, what does it mean to edify? Did Christ edify? In what ways did Christ edify? So there was a guy called Christ. Okay, you guys are a little slow this morning. There's a guy called Christ. He walked in. It's a rain. He walked on the earth. He kind of made an impact because we're still talking about him. Angie, you got a comment? And then we'll go to Bruce.
Well, he edified because he taught, and he taught the Word of God, but he also explained and encouraged and displayed his faith.
Okay, very good. That's a great way to say it. Bruce, do you have a comment?
Actually, it's kind of generally the same thing. He showed by example, and even when he was, woe ye hypocrites, Pharisees, Sadducees, and stuff like that, his heart was breaking for him. It wasn't out of a maliciousness or a judgment thing. It could be so much better for you.
That's true. That's a great point. Mylon?
Just real recent, matter of fact, what day did Tiana call? I got a call from Council Bluffs Hospital, and I went over there for a young lady. Her dad died about 3 years ago, just a young man, right off, Sam Edson. Anybody remember him? But anyway, Tiana's his daughter. And Tiana called and she says, I know you can bring me what I need. And I felt in my heart and my mind, and my wife told me that you need to respond. She needs you right now. So I jumped in my car and I went over there to Council Bluffs, and she's having the same heart problem I've got.
Oh, my.
And she's now going to, in Clarkson Hospital. I was over there. But she told me, with her mother sitting there, her mom's Yvonne Edson. Some of you might know her that way, but Tiana said that she told her mom to get someone that could bring Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, whatever brought her that through me made her feel good.
Right.
I felt good because she did. So there's so much that can happen with us if we do what Jesus asked us to. It can bring a whole different feeling than just a nice day, because we have a lot of nice days, all of us.
True.
But not nice with Jesus. With the absence of Jesus, would they be?
It's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a great testimony, Mylon, because it is that exemplifies what Christ is preaching, what he's teaching. We were talking about when Bruce was talking, and I thought of the examples that as Christ, that Andrew was talking about how he taught. Well, he taught in a way that did just that. Remember the woman at the well? So he taught her. What about the woman to be stoned? Right? And see how he taught. He brought awareness to the situation. Because what was he telling the woman at the well? What was he telling her? What point was he trying to get across?
That she had value, that she was loved.
Use your microphone. Say it again.
if my finger can find the switch. He was telling her that she had value, that she was loved, she had worth, and that she could really, through him and with him, go in a different direction with her life and have a greater reward, if you will.
Good point. What was her concern though? Why did she not think that?
Because of what she was hearing around her all the time, I'm sure.
Who was she?
Well, she was an adult.
She was a Samaritan.
Yeah,
she was a
Samaritan too, which were, to excuse a phrase that's been used derogatory for years, she was the trailer trash of the day.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's such a stereotypical thing that
Right. Good
there's no
point.
truth in it.
Yeah, and Brian?
So, what Christ did, he gave people hope.
Right.
And that's basically what he gave. You have the choice of salvation in and through me. It's your choice. And he gave them hope even in whatever plight they were in, whether they were Samaritan, whether they were an adulteress, whether they were whatever, a thief on the cross. He gave them hope, and it was their choice to believe and do. And that's what he gave them. And some people didn't, and some people were saved.
Right. That's right.
Basically, that's what he did. Is he came to show us the way. It says that his paths are righteousness, so walk in them.
That's a good point. Bruce?
Yeah, and if you look at the four Gospels, or including Acts and everything else, if you look at the people that he called and used to establish the church on earth, I mean, my gosh, they were the outcasts, the undesirables, the untouchables of the society, tax collectors, fishermen, soldier that,
Right.
he was out to do them all in and these kind of things.
Right.
They'd be the last people you'd expect. In our society, we got so much, he's got a PhD from such and such a seminary or whatever, Not that a PhD is a bad thing. But I don't think we've really learned anything in a couple of millennia.
That's a good point. Brian?
I was just going to say.
Use your microphone.
I was just going to say, what Mylan did is what Christ did.
Exactly.
He brought her hope, and that's our responsibility, that the hope that's within us, if we have faith, that hope is what we bring to other people in and through Jesus Christ.
Look at verse 14. Who would read verse 14 for us this morning? Mark? Thank you, Mark.
Uh, 14?
Yeah.
Now we exhort you, brethren, warn them that are unruly, comfort the feeble-minded, support the weak, be patient toward all men.
Now think about the depth of those few words from a man that has been persecuted and probably even more persecuted, and be able to withstand even up to this time and through really all of his recorded life that we know of, to remain as faithful and strong. And it goes back to what we were talking about. Do we provide hope, which is part of edification, to those that are around us? And by the way, that's hope in everything, not just hope in Jesus Christ, but hope in life through Jesus Christ. There's hope in all that you do. There's hope in driving to church. There's hope in going to work. There's hope in the birth of a child. There's so many things. Mark?
Oh, I was just thinking about the verse 14 there, that be patient towards all men.
Yeah.
At Camp Emmanuel this past week, one of our days was show humbleness to others and to God by being patient.
Oh.
And that was our Tuesday discussion. So here we had 3 classes about patience, being patient with each other. And I think the Lord was trying to give the staff a bit of a real life example lesson, because the kids were just particularly unruly that day. In fact, I told one of the other staff, I go, here we are talking about patience, and I don't know if we're being as patient we should.
I was just going to ask, how did it work out? How did it?
Well, you know what, and actually the person I was talking with was having a little bit of a difficult time with the patience with them.
Sure.
And that's the kind of reason I said the comment. And that must have touched that person's heart, because later she was actually doing the campfire.
Oh, yeah.
And she actually made some new verses on like 2 different songs to talk about patience.
Nice. So it's a process, right? It's a process because all of us are unique individuals with different emotions. And many times our emotions and our mindset is because of who we were, not who we have the hope in being. And that's one thing that we have to remember, because I can't allow who I was to determine who I will be if I have faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that happens to us because we carry that baggage with us all the way through, even when we work to edify, even when we work to strengthen, to counsel and bring comfort, and work with those of patience. How many of you have ever said, I just don't have patience for this? I don't have the time nor the patience. I think I said that this morning on the way in.
I'm getting a good lesson in patience this last couple of weeks.
There you go. Life does that, Mark.
You know, the counsel to edify one another. Mike's dying here. I'll just speak up. We really can't edify one another without patience.
Right. That's right. Yeah, you have to have that patience, because then that brings, and I go back, and I always go back to Bruce mentioned the 4 Gospels. I go back because when we look at, and even in sections of the Book of Mormon, when Christ was with the people, he had patience with them. He had tolerance. He had mercy. He had grace. All of those things that we have those things, and sometimes we brag about having, oh yeah, I've got a lot of patience. I've got a lot of mercy. Do we really? So it's something that we have to grow into, because you just don't automatically become, well, right after baptism, did you become the best Christian you could be?
Still working on it.
There you go. Still working on the process, right? You're still working on everything that Christ asked you to be. But because you have the light in front of you, as Paul said, you have the hope, you have all of these things in front. Now, for this hour that we've been, or 45 minutes we've been talking about this, we've all been pretty good, have we not? We've gotten along, haven't we? I mean, maybe another 30 minutes and we've got Zion, I'm thinking. So, but you see what will happen. We'll get out, we'll get in the afternoon, something, Bruce will, you'll have a challenge with a family member, or you know what I mean. Something will happen that will cause a little chink, a little scratch that maybe would dent your faith, or maybe prevent you from having full faith. And it's how we power through that will determine how bright our light is, right? So.
Just a quick little testimony, since I kind of touched on the subject. Not even a decade ago, just a few years back, with this particular daughter we're dealing with, I get so frustrated with her that, I'd been known, God forgive me, to snap at her and tell her she was not making the smartest decisions and stuff. But the last couple of weeks, I feel the frustration with her and other things, but God's given me the patience to see that she's got to work through some of these things on her own and just need a guide.
Right.
We can't tell her what to do, or she'll never realize what she needs to do.
Right.
And this week's easier than it was when she first came up, and I first heard she was coming up.
Sure.
But God gave me what I needed to set back and say, okay. And I'll admit, part of that is there's kind of a window involved here where it's going to go one way or the other.
Sure.
But she actually is trying to make good decisions and such, you know, and getting the help she needs. And not so much expecting others to do it for her. Now she's asking, what do I need to do next?
Good. Well,
So-
patience might be paying off then.
Yeah, well, for one of us.
Yeah, there you go. Brian, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think we fall short a lot of times because, like you said, you can tell them the things that they're doing are wrong because it tells us that we're supposed to warn people. But our problem is we want to tell them how they need to live their lives.
That's it.
And that's where we fall short is, well, you need to, and instead of saying, you know, if you do these things, there are going to be consequences for your actions, you know. And you have to kind of lead it into that direction, obviously in a very patient and loving way, like Christ did. And sometimes those who are very rebellious, he didn't do it in a very kind and loving way. He brought it forth and called them out for the evil that they were doing.
Right.
So there comes discernment with those things that we need to be very careful with in trying to help people make better decisions.
Good point.
There's time for the braided cord.
Well, and there are times the best thing said is nothing. Mark?
Well, Brian's comment, it's like the delivery is so important
Yes.
with that patience. And I think maybe that's kind of the difference between a Pharisee and a saint.
Good point.
Pharisee or follower of Christ.
Yeah.
The Pharisee is right, has you know, let alone all that,
Right.
but the application of it.
And the application, because you guys are right on, and I believe this with my heart, the application or the delivery of those things, you become more sensitive to the Spirit the more you follow the leadings of the Spirit to know what level of delivery is required, if any. And instead of us going off of our emotional, you know, because we've all had kids, you know, you just want to snap at them, boy, you know, but when we look at it, then the more mature we get it within the scriptures, within the gospel, we'll have a better understanding of what delivery is required at the time. Because you make a great point. You know, Christ he got after him. But those were those that knew. So, all right, well, we're getting into time. Brother Sudduth has a message that will bring fire and brimstone to us, but with loving kindness. Right, Bruce?
My hope and prayer is it ain't me, I'm just a
Oh, look, hear the humility drip. There you go, brother. Love it.
Interesting word you chose there.